Hi everyone, I'm Mike and this is the Sunday Art Show. So the sun is shining in Devon, so a really nice time to just relax in the back garden. You can see the pet cat is enjoying the weather, and hopefully you can also see that we have some lovely flowers in bloom. So I can't take any credit for that, that's all down to my wife. But I really enjoy just sitting in the garden sometimes and painting or drawing flowers. And the way I treat flowers is a little bit unconventional, really, I guess. I tend to do more of a stylized approach, try and capture the essence of the flower or the plant. And then one of the things I like to do is just kind of experiment and be creative in a non-formal and relaxed way and just try different media and kind of come up with a pattern, really, or a design. And that's what I'm starting to do here. So I'm starting off today with Sharpie marker pens, and the plant I just showed you, that was kind of a bluey violet in colour. I'm afraid I don't know the name of that particular plant, so if anybody does, let me know in the comments below. And I've chosen this colour to outline a few of the flowers. So I've got some fuchsia there, that's the one I'm going to do next. I know the name of that one, that's a fuchsia. But I'm choosing colours for my outline work which contrast with the colours of the flowers. So the purpley violet flowers, I chose a red, and because the fuchsia are kind of a pink, magenta, reddish colour, I've chosen a pale bluey green for the outline there. So what I'm doing is just selectively picking out flower heads or the odd leaf or the odd stem on the cat's back. And you can also see actually the weather's kind of clouded over a little bit, so it's a bit variable, the weather today, but in general it's been pretty nice. And once the kitty gets out of the way, I'll get back to doing my outline work with the Sharpie markers. So as I say, I'm just putting this fuchsia down. Now, with the fuchsia, the flowers, some of them are kind of closed up, like the one I've just done there, but others, the outer petals open up to reveal inner petals, and that's what I'm drawing here now. So the outer petals kind of peel back and unfurl to reveal these more delicate, pale white petals underneath. And then you've got these little strands coming off, which have little heads on as well. So it's just good fun, I find, rather than trying to do sort of a photorealistic version of the plants, to just kind of pick out little bits, kind of capture the essence of them, almost like little motifs or little logos, really. And I just find it's a really relaxing way. I think I've spoken before a few months ago, that being at the beach and working in the open air is great fun and relaxing, but just being in the back garden, petting the cat in between, doing some sketching and painting, that's also very relaxing as well. I would like to think that the cat agrees. And so what I'm going to do is continue in that vein initially. So we've got some roses here, some pink roses. And I've changed my position in the garden a little bit now. And so, again, a contrasting colour to pink, just coming in with a blue Sharpie pen this time. And just like I did for the fuchsia, I'm picking out a rosebud here, which is pretty closed up. And then once I've done that and included the odd leaf and part of the stem of the plant, I will do a rose which is opened up a little bit more. So I'm not being too, sometimes the leaves are very much attached to the stem, but other times I'll just pop in an isolated leaf here or there. But now I'm tackling that rose head that I mentioned, which is a little more open than the closed off bud that I drew previously. So already I've got red, or an orangey red, I've got my bluey green, and then I'm using pure blue now. And as you can see, I'm using a Sharpie, as I mentioned before. And the idea with that is that the Sharpie puts down permanent lines. So I'm going to be coming in a minute with some Inktense pencil. I'm going to be using acrylic. I'm going to be using interference acrylics to get iridescent effects, and maybe some other stuff as well. I can't remember the name of these. I think this might be called string of pearls, these little blue flowers. So I'm going to add those now with an orange. But as I was saying, I'm going to be using a mix of different media, and that's kind of part of the fun of this little experiment, is to just try out different things and get different effects. The surface I'm working on today, as usual, is mixed media paper, but I'm using quite a big piece of paper today, so it's A2 in size. So it's around about 22 inches by about 15 inches. And as you can see, I've put masking tape all around the edges, all four edges, and that's because the paper's going to get reasonably wet in a bit. And so I don't mind it buckling a bit, because when it dries out, this paper, it's pretty good. It tends to go quite flat, but I don't want it sort of peeling up too much, and equally if the breeze does pick up, then I don't want the page flapping around in the wind. But you can see I've also put in those string of pearl flowers with some magenta marker as well. Now this one here, this brightly coloured plant, this is a hydrangea. So I think this is probably going to be the last plant for this particular design. So as you saw, the hydrangea has bright pink magenta flowers. So I'm coming in with a purple now, and just kind of the head of the plant, it's got a multitude of small flowers. So I'm just treating that as one mass, and then just picking out little bits rather than trying to draw each individual flower. So the idea behind this working outside in the garden is, I want to create something which I'm happy with, but I don't want to get too tight and tense with detail. I want to, it's meant to be like a relaxation time. It's meant to be free-flowing, kind of just open-minded. So I don't want to get too caught up in little details and being overly precise. So there's the finished thing. You can see I put a second hydrangea head up in the top right-hand corner there. And now I've gone back to the Inktense pencils. So I'm just going to grab one of those and just put in a few rough lines for the background. So what I'm going to be doing next is kind of killing the white. I want to just get a multitude of colours here. So adding some yellow now. And I'm going to do that in rather a haphazard fashion all over the picture. For the most part, I'm going to leave the flowers completely untouched. I'm just working on the background and just picking different colours, more or less at random, at this stage at least. But keeping the colours, fairly representative of what's going on in the garden. But you can see I've put some darker colours, and I'm continuing to put in darker colours now in the bottom half of the painting, and keeping the upper area light. And having done that, this is the really cool thing with the Inktense pencils. When you dilute them with a brush with water, then you get these wonderful washes of ink colour. And you can see I'm not even caring about going over the flowers now. I just want to blend all of those colours together and work across the page with the clean wet brush, and just let the colours flow into one another and get a nice covering of bright pigment all across the paper. And you can see that's starting to come together now. So I've done all the lighter colours in the top half, but now I'm going for the darker colours at the bottom. So the idea is to just kind of represent, when you look at a plant, generally speaking, the shadows are deeper the closer to the ground you go, because there's more foliage above it to create shadow, and generally speaking, the plant is wider and deeper at the bottom. So that's kind of my thinking there. So I don't mind that some of the pencil marks are left, and just creating, a variation in textures as well as colours as I move around here. But this is a great way to cover a big surface of paper in a relatively short time. And again, you don't have to be precise. You can just have fun and see what effects you get. Move the brush in different directions and different lengths of brush stroke and so on and so forth. So there we go. We've got rid of most of the white, left some exposed, so that it's peeking through to create little highlights. And now we can go back to this plant. But before I did that, what I did was I used some interference acrylics. So interference acrylics work in a different way to normal acrylics. What they do is they selectively scatter a very narrow range of colour. So if you paint them onto a white surface, it's quite a weak effect. But if you paint them onto a black surface like my palette, then you get a bright shimmering colour. So the idea here is, just like I did with the Inktense, now that the Inktense is completely dry, I'm going to coat some of the painting. You can see on there near my brush, I've got some blue shimmer there. I've put some blue interference acrylic over that dark background. And it's quite a subtle effect, but it does light up at certain angles. And you can see on the palette the purple there coming to life. And now I've switched to gold, so I'm putting some gold interference acrylic over the top. And the idea is to have this as kind of a background effect. I don't want the effect to overwhelm the finished piece, but hopefully little bits of this will kind of show through. You can see the gold catching the light there really strongly. And so you get different colours appearing as you change your viewing angle or as the lighting conditions change. So you can see the blue and the gold kind of lighting up. There's also a little bit of copper on there, that's one of the weaker ones, and a little bit of interference green as well. So if you haven't used the interference acrylics, worth a go. They're good fun. So I think what I'm trying to do here, I'm just trying to show you how the gold lights up and then kind of disappears as you change the angle. So you can just see it coming to life and then disappearing as I change the angle of the painting. There's our hydrangea again. And now I've switched to my interactive acrylic paints. So these are really cool because these are the paints where even once they're dry, you can spray the paint with water and reactivate them so they become fluid and easy to blend. Or equally, if you're working outdoors on a hot sunny day like this one, if the paint on your palette dries up, it's no problem. You can just spray the palette with water and then you're ready to mix your colours again. You don't have to worry at all. Now the hydrangea have these wonderful bright pink flowers, so to mix that colour up I've just taken some magenta and some titanium white, and as you can see I've got about a 1/2 inch flat brush, and I've kept a little bit of the lighter version of that colour on the edge of the brush so that as I fill in the area I've got a little bit of blending going on. And now I'm coming in with some almost pure white, and on top of that first coat of paint I'm just adding some loose highlights. So again, I'm not getting bogged down in detail at all. And having done that, having added the mid-tone and the highlight tone, I'm now adding a deeper purple. So I did that, and there's the second hydrangea head that I've coloured in already, adding some deeper purples in there as well. So just keeping things very loose and relaxed, not wanting to get too fussy, and using a darker version again of that purple for the stems of the plants. And again, I'm just using my flat brush here, and as you can see, just using it end on to fill in sections of the line work that I put in earlier. And it's just a nice way to give a quick rendering of an impressionist style flower. And you can see some of the gold paint bottom left of the screen there, just kind of catching the sunlight. So that all of that acrylic's dry, all of the ink tints is completely dry, and both of those are completely waterproof, as is the line work from the Sharpie markers. So I can paint away on top of all of that stuff and not worry that it's going to shift anywhere. Now the roses are a little bit more of a pure pink, so I've put a little bit of cadmium yellow in with the magenta, but it's mostly titanium white into this paler pink now, and I'm using a similar treatment for the roses as I did for the hydrangea. However, I want a little bit more smooth blending going on for the roses, so once I've filled in this closed bud, what I plan on doing is just taking the water spray and coating the surface of that paint, and that's going to allow me to blend in a more fluid way than I did for the hydrangea. So the interactives are really they're really flexible. You can do traditional acrylic effects, or you can do the more soft blending that they allow.
Good.
Now that's me saying good to my wife. We're just chatting. That's not me complimenting my own painting. What I'm doing here is just lifting off a little bit of that pink off of the rosebud, and I'm doing that to reveal some of the underlying interference gold. So there, I've just sprayed the flowers as I said, and another quick spray of the bottle from the water bottle, and it just allows a little bit of softer blending to go on. And I could make that blending even softer if I wanted to, but I'm not getting too bogged down into precise effects. This is just a big piece of work. I'm going to kind of relax and have fun with. So we've switched to the fuchsia now. So I'm using a permanent alizarin mixed with some phthalo blue to create these purpley reds. And I've got much more of the alizarin in the mix here, just to kind of match the fuchsia colours. And much like the line work, I'm not trying to match the colours exactly, but want to get them reasonably close. And I'm staying with a big brush just to kind of loosely fit those in as well. So now we've gone over to the string of pearls, and I think this is actually cobalt blue I used for this one. I switched my blues. So the idea as I'm working away here is I'm just kind of building up sections of colour, and although I'm representing flowers, I'm keeping in mind how does the thing work as a whole. It's just an abstract pattern of colours. So this is cobalt blue mixed with a little bit of magenta and a bit of titanium white that I used there. So having filled in the flowers, I'm now filling in a few of the leaves, but I'm varying the greens that I use as I move around the painting. And having filled in some of the leaves, I'm filling in some of the stems, and then going back to the leaves. So I'm just building up layers of colour all across the painting as a whole, so that one area doesn't become overworked relative to another. Now what I'm doing here is just rather broad and loose brush strokes just to fill in some background colour, to add a bit more green to the background, because the background is a little bit too wishy-washy for my liking at the moment. And I'm also filling in around some of the lighter areas as well of the flowers. So here you can see the burnt umber paint had really got quite dry in the hot sun, but because I'm using the interactives, a quick spray with the water bottle, and I'm ready to go again. So you don't really waste any paint when you use the interactive acrylics. But that said, conventional acrylic, it does have its place in my work. I do like using conventional acrylic still. So it's just whatever you're trying to achieve, really. What I'm doing here, I mixed up some ultramarine blue with burnt umber, and I'm using that to create, or also a bit of cadmium red, using that to create a very deep colour, to put in some really dark shadows. But also what I want to do is make some of these lighter colours, some of these blues and greens, just pop a little more. So having done that and having got that dry, I'm now coming in with kind of almost a dry brush effect with a fairly vibrant green. So cobalt blue and cadmium yellow and titanium white. And I'm just adding a little bit of loose texture over those dark shadow areas, and just blending some of the edges of those areas into the background a bit more. So again, it's another loose technique. So we're building up tons and tons of different textures here. We've got Sharpie marker, we've got loose washes watercolor style of Inktense pencil, we've got interference acrylic applied both directly and then applied wet in wet to create blending. We've got the camera. That's me getting confused about the filming. Sorry about that. Coming with some cadmium yellow now and titanium white, putting it on more thickly. We've got the interference acrylics. We've got dry brush. So as well as an array of colour and line work, we're getting a huge range of textures as well. And then with a little bit of that yellow still in the mix and some titanium white and switching to a small round brush, I just fill in some of the lighter areas next. And I do the same for the fuchsia petals, the central fuchsia petals as well. Although that white is actually titanium white with just a hint of blue in. So I'm trying to vary the whites just subtly. Now, having got these areas of dark colour I put down quite a little while ago now, if we were watching this in real time, I've now resprayed the surface of the painting with water, and you can see that's allowing me just to tease out the edges of those patches of colour and move the paint around a bit to vary the texture and soften some of the edges in some of those regions, because I felt they were a little bit too kind of hard-edged and too discreet and different from the rest of the background. So just blending those in a little bit and having good fun doing that. And also experimenting here again with putting these very dark colours next to the flower petals to make those petal colours seem more vibrant. Back to my round brush and just filling in a stem of the fuchsia there. To be honest, I kind of regretted doing that a little bit. I preferred using the flat brush treatment I'd given before. Oh, but the kitty is back. So this is one of the really fun things about working outside in the garden. These impromptu interruptions from the cat.
Always brings a smile to my face, and it's funny to see his interaction with what I'm doing sometimes. So a little bit of an attention seeker, as you can see. So this imprecise subject matter, interruptions from the pet cat, being out in the sunshine, being out in the fresh air, and then just changing the different materials I'm using and working in a loose way. It's just a really good way to open up your mind creatively and not get too bogged down in working in one direction. I'm going back to the stems of the flowers now and adding some highlights in. So adding some cadmium yellow just in little sections of the stems. So just trying to simulate the patterns of light you get along a stem when it kind of catches light in certain places, but other parts are in shadow. And really, I'm just continuing to work intuitively and just kind of letting my hand and eye wander across the page, really. Now this next bit I'm really just making up entirely. I just thought, well, some little bursts of little dots of colour, which could be there. You do get very tiny little flowers and seedlings and things. So I'm just using the corner or the edge of my brush with little bits of cadmium yellow, pure cadmium yellow, and I'm just adding those over the top of the dark background areas in particular. Randomly placed, random in size, random in shape and orientation. And then, in addition to the yellow, I also add a mix of yellow and white and some titanium white, some pale blue, little bits of pale orange. So just little bursts of colour, again adding to the texture and the layered effect that I'm putting down. But I concentrate most of those small dots in the lower half of the painting. There are a few higher up, but mostly in the lower half. So now I've gone back to my Sharpie marker pens. I'm coming in with a brown here. I'm working on top of the dried acrylic, just adding a little more definition and line work to edges of the flowers, going over some of the line work I've used before. Other times deliberately missing it so you get a double line. Other times following the ragged edge of a blotch of paint I've got. So just again, working between tight and loose and alternating, just working with those layers over and over to just experiment and get the effect that I like. So for example, with this rosebud, having used a red to do some extra outlining, I've now switched to my kind of turquoise green to add a little bit extra to the stem there, the flower stem. And this kind of bluey purple plant that we've got, adding some line work in there to just increase the structure and the quality of drawing on the leaves, because the leaves are actually quite angular and they're quite firm lines going down them. So I just felt it would add something to include those. Little details in the centre flowers of the string of pearls. And again, continuing to experiment with colour and outline. So this is something I do with my animal paintings. If you remember, I'll start with quite precise line work, loosely block in, and then refine and tighten up, and maybe even do some line work at the end. But what I've done now is actually switch to an acrylic paint marker. So elsewhere on the channel you'll have seen me use the chunky versions of these to do 10-minute sheet paintings, or to paint a cow in a landscape in just 20 minutes. They're really quick to use. This is a narrower nibbed version, so the ones I use for the animal paintings generally have a 15mm wide nib, so it's really pretty chunky. But this one I think just has a 5mm wide nib, so it's a little more precise, but you can still get a nice heavy line with it. And so I'm using my darker colours here, going with blues and dark purples, and just adding kind of thick outlines to the flowers, which is a little bit counterintuitive really, because flowers we conventionally think of as being very delicate things. But this is a technique I used years ago now, probably about 15 years ago. I did a commission for the Devon Wildlife Trust with a wild meadow garden, and adding the thick outlines. I like the effect adding thick blue outlines to the plant life gave, and so I thought I'd revisit that idea and add some really deliberately chunky and thick lines to some of these delicate flowers. And it also helps to pull them forward from the background. And in addition to that, I can add some kind of dark areas of shadow here and there as well. So I can just enhance and tighten focus on certain parts of the painting by adding in these outline colours. So for example, that very pale petal I've now surrounded with dark colour, and here with the head of the hydrangea I'm adding another strong outline to that, bold outline, but only to the top half. Yeah, we can add a little bit to the stem or around the stem, or outline a leaf, or even draw a leaf where there wasn't one on some of the random background. So that's another approach you can take, you know. So there's our finished painting. So I always love just peeling off the edges of masking tape on this type of painting, because when you clean up the edges in that way, it instantly frames the picture. So you can see it gives a nice clean edge, and it brings the painting to life in a way it wasn't quite before. So there's the finished pic, and what I thought I'd do is I'd experiment with putting that onto a range of different products on my Redbubble site, because the abstract patterns of the bright colours, it really works well on certain things. So we've got a shower curtain there, or a drinks container that's just blipped off screen, and you know, maybe a laptop cover, or a cushion, something like that, or a throw blanket. All of those things, leggings for example. It's really good fun to just experiment with how the design looks on different things. So there's the throw blanket I mentioned. Anyway, that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you enjoyed the time out in the sunshine, painting in the open air, and experimenting with a huge range of different media. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you next Sunday for the next episode of the Sunday Art Show. Thanks very much for watching.